Hello again. This is Jada Adams, your host. Welcome to INFODUMP, Under the Influence. Today, we're at episode 5, holy shit, with my guest, Nicole Hambleton, who I've known for a long time. And Nicole is here talking about childhood development.
Yes.
So what is your role in childhood development, or is this something that you've studied?
Yes. So I have an undergraduate in psychology, specializing in child psychology, and then I have master's degrees in teaching and educational administration, and then I have Montessori certificates in Montessori education from ages 2.5 through 18.
Nice. Okay. What is the thing that sticks out for you the most that people would need to learn about childhood development? What's the most important thing that you've run into?
Well, I think really it's the reason why I started teaching, because the educational system really failed me as I was growing up. And my parents had a hard time with it too, which caused a lot of, it caused a lot of family problems in our dynamic growing up, is because people don't understand what is considered typical for different age groups. And they don't understand, why little kids want to move things around and change things all the time. They don't understand, why temper tantrums get thrown. They don't understand why elementary kids are so rude, and they don't understand why teenagers are so rebellious. So when kids are behaving in these completely typical and necessary ways for their development, their parents and their teachers are often treating them like something is wrong with them. And I definitely grew up, thinking that as, when I hit my teen years, especially from about age 12 on, I was definitely treated like something was wrong with me when the way I was behaving was completely typical and necessary.
Yeah, me too.
Yep. So I think that's that's really what got me into my field. And then also, taking each child, well, and this is another way that I think the traditional education system fails children is that they look at children as a group. And
like a monolithic entity.
Yeah. Instead of looking at them, as an individual child, and that each child is different, and each child will develop at their own pace and learn what their own interests compel them to learn, and then also, based on their own psychology, what is appropriate and necessary for one child is going to be different from another child.
Very much so. Yeah. How varied can that get?
Extremely. I've had children in my class that were, never going to be able to learn to read, and were still doing, basic addition when they were 16 years old.
Yeah.
And I've had children that were working on, college level mathematics when they were in first grade.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it really, to take both of those kids and expect them to be able to do the same thing at the same time is completely unrealistic and is going to crush them psychologically. Both for different reasons. So
yeah. Oh man. it's unfortunate that society kind of has this idea that we can only accommodate so many variances before we start to fall off. So what we're going to do is we're going to accommodate for less variances. And then we're going to start putting people who don't fit into insane asylums, or we're going to start hiding them away from society because they can't conform.
And that's really why I got into Montessori, precisely that. So Dr. Montessori, 200 years ago, or I guess not 200, but 100 and, where are we, 24, 100, 120 years ago, was in Italy, and she was the first female physician in Italy, and they basically wouldn't let her practice after she got her medical degree, and they said, well, you can't do surgery, but we'll let you work with, they were called the idiot children, the kids that they would put in the asylums because they couldn't adjust to typical behaviors, etc. So these were kids with, developmental disabilities and autism and, what have you. So she went and worked with these kids that had been institutionalized, and they were basically being kept like animals in cages. And, this is, under Mussolini here. So,
it wasn't really better anywhere else in the world, quite frankly.
Right. And to that point in America, education had taken a factory-based model where everything kind of all over the world in education was done to an end. It was, what do we need? Well, we need factory workers because we've got this industrial revolution going on. And so we are going to train children to be factory workers.
Or coal miners or whatever the industry needed gears for.
Right. And in America, we still do that.
Yes, we do.
And so Dr. Montessori went and worked with these kids, and she decided to do a completely, being not an educator, she was a physician. So she went in and she observed. She observed what these kids wanted to do naturally and what needs they were trying to fulfill. And then she designed educational things to fulfill those needs. So, if a child wanted to order, put things in order habitually, then, she designed materials that they could put in order and therefore understand some concept.
Okay.
So she designed like hands-on materials that would teach, without them having to like memorize or understand or
so meeting the kids where they were
component.
verbally and mentally,
right,
and attempting to kind of reach them in a way that they could understand, as opposed to forcing the understanding of the world on them.
Right. And so she developed these manipulatives, based on what they were showing interest and need for as individuals. And the result was, after a year of doing this, she had the institutionalized kids take the national exams for Italy, and they performed better than the typical students that had been going to school.
That's really cool.
So that's where, the whole thing comes from, is this individualized approach. So I am, so all of the kids in my classrooms are working all at the same time on very different things.
Okay.
And I've had, I've worked most recently at a public middle school, at a Montessori program within that middle school, and had the administration tell me, what you're saying is impossible.
Wow.
You can't possibly keep track of everything that all of these kids in your you have 50 students across the board. You can't possibly keep track of what everybody's doing if they're all doing different things.
Yeah.
And I'm, going, well, that's why I have the extra degrees. We're actually specifically trained in doing that.
Yeah. And I mean, how many people were called crazy for wanting to go to space?
Right.
Or wanting to build a car or an airplane. I mean, everything starts off as this fanciful notion that everybody around the person calls crazy, and then it comes into existence, and then we all act like, oh, airplanes were always here. Weren't we always flying? Yeah, dinosaurs flew. So, yeah, that's awesome that you're facilitating that. Thank you. It's good work.
That's I don't think I could do anything else. Like, trust me, I get tired every once in a while, and I try to do something else, and I always come back to it.
Yeah.
So
yeah. Tell me about some of the kids that you've worked with.
Oh wow. I mean, I've worked with kids across the board. I think the main goal for me is as an educator isn't to impart knowledge, but it's interesting. I was listening to Freakonomics on NPR on the way over here.
Okay.
And they were talking about, I want to say his name was Feynman?
Feynman, yeah.
Okay. So he was on the Manhattan Project. He was a physicist. He also figured out the problem with the O-rings and the Challenger explosion. He like everything that they were saying, I was like, yes, this. He basically said that there are a lot of fools in the world because, these people can tell you what, tons of things are, but they can't tell you how they work. And so it's, and I was like, yes, absolutely. So my, my number one goal as an educator is to impart curiosity and playfulness.
And critical thinking skills.
Right.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, if, it's not so important that these kids memorize the what of everything, but that they have the tools to figure out how when they are curious about it. And then to stimulate that curiosity. So, so that's really where I go for that. And so I've had children that, come in a range of curiosities, I guess. Where some come to me and they want to know about everything, and they want to know how the whole universe works, and they're just constantly researching,
just hungry for knowledge.
Yeah, they want to know everything.
Yeah.
And then I've had some kids actually, and these are every year in my class. I could say this. I have kids like that, and then I have kids that have no interests. It's already been crushed out of them by the time they come to me. Yeah. And so I have to rekindle.
How do you do that?
I ask them a lot of questions.
Okay.
So
let's say I'm a kid that I could give a shit. I'm being abused at home. I'm not eating well. I don't really have a safe person to talk to, and I end up in your class. How would you converse with me or connect with me in a way to get me connected to that creative place?
Well, first and foremost, with a child like that, is that you want to take care of their basic needs.
Yeah.
And I'm on a lot of education forums, and you get teachers that will say well, that's not my job to make sure that that they know how to problem solve during conflict, and I'm like, well, actually it is, because they can't learn without feeling, safe.
Yeah, and then they go out in the world and visit their trauma responses on everybody around them, and it just
Right.
like the cycle continues.
Right, and they will continue to be thrown under the bus.
Yeah.
Throughout their entire life, and it just without conflict resolution skills, kids don't realize that there's anything wrong with the way that they're being treated. And so I do a lot of talking about what abuse is, and when and parents, I get parent backlash sometimes, but like when
I bet you do.
when kids call each other names,
Yeah.
I say that is abusive. That's verbal abuse.
Yeah.
You are verbally abusing that other person.
Yeah.
And I make it very serious because as an adult, that's not acceptable.
But I imagine that causes problem when the kid goes home and then they're like, "Mom, you can't say that because that's abusive," and then all of a sudden.
Yep.
Who are you, little child, who is, I am 5 times your size and with one hit could put you in the ground? Who are you to tell me, an adult, what I can do? And it's just like, why don't we listen to children when they tell us they're afraid of us?
Yeah.
Or that something that we're doing is making them uncomfortable.
Absolutely. And so, I look for those signs, and I do call CPS like I'm supposed to, at least twice a year, on various families that I interact with, for abuse or neglect, but before that, there's a lot of work, that we go through. And luckily, right now I'm in a place where I have a really good team of professionals where we all get in, and, there's a psychologist and a social worker and a counselor and reading specialists. And
it's really
kids
distressing
who are abused typically have trouble reading. And all of these things. So
hi, Resident Moon. Go ahead, sorry.
No, it's so luckily I'm in a place right now where we have a whole team of experts that can come together and work with these children, and basically the idea, and I've had children who have now grown up and become adults, who have come back to me, and said, you were the one champion that I had. Everybody else, just pushed me to learn the academics and blah blah blah.
Enough to pass the test,
right?
And make sure that the school gets its funding for the next year.
Yep. But you were the one that because a lot of times kids only will go through the Montessori program for like 3 years, and so they will, they'll go back and say, you were the only ones that showed me that there was another way to behave than what I was seeing at home, and that what I was seeing wasn't okay. And so now that I'm grown up, I know that there's another way, and I want to be that different kind of person. I don't want to follow in my parents' footsteps.
That's fantastic. It's just distressing that that's not available for every child in public school.
Yeah.
And as much as I hate it, the system is working as intended. They tell you it's supposed to work one way, but when you see it working in an entirely different way, where it just scars kids and punishes people who tattle, punishes people who say they're being abused, and then they coddle the abuser or the abuser's family, it's like...
Right.
It's immensely heartbreaking.
Yeah, and we see that. We see that reflected in adult society.
Oh yeah.
And
then we wonder why people are rude and shitty to each other.
Right. And and it expands onto the world stage and politics and warfare.
Oh
and
yeah.
As if people had empathy and compassion, then they would have very different reactions to situations.
Very much
and
so.
so
Yeah.
in our system of education, we teach lessons on empathy and compassion and peaceful problem-solving skills in the same way that we teach lessons on math and language and everything else.
That's just immense to me. That was something that wasn't really available when we were growing up.
Right.
I was diagnosed as hyper back in the 1970s. They put me on Ritalin for 9 years. And man, the things I couldn't control the things that came out of my mouth. I was like a bull in a china shop. I didn't really have any friends because I didn't know the game.
Right.
I didn't know the rules of how to properly navigate this world where nobody talked in a way that was helpful. It's just
Right.
like everything was obfuscated. There was no straightforward answer or no straightforward questions. You had to fucking dance around everything. And if you
Right.
got it wrong, you got penalized and you lost friends. And it was so hard. It was
Right.
really painful.
And now we've got 1 in 4 children being born on the spectrum. And, so I have a handful of kids on the spectrum in my class at any given time. And it is a spectrum. They all range in differences. I've got some kids that have no interest in social interaction, and I have some that are very, very social, but do not understand why the world works the way it works. And so...
Me too. Hard saying,
Yeah.
man. I'm right there with you, kid. I am right there with you.
So then we have to kind of create materials and situations for them. They are curious as to why people interact socially the way that they do, and so then I have to create lessons and materials for those specific children so that they understand about humans being social animals and just the sociology of it all.
Now, for the lessons, do you craft that from your own experience, or do you sometimes talk to other people about their childhood experiences and kind of crowdsource it in a way?
Both. There's a lot of good online resources now. There were not when I first started teaching 24 years ago.
Thank you. Thank you. Because teaching is a much needed profession. I appreciate you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
But, luckily now the internet is what it is. And so you can find, there's a good chance somebody out there has encountered the same, situation that you have before or that I have before. And so, they have some good ideas, and then I'll take that and build off of it. Or I'll talk to other, Montessori teachers or other, alternative education teachers out there, who can, who know how to create, hands-on materials or things like that. So, for instance, just simple things like I have one student now who's on the spectrum, very social, very verbal, but he doesn't understand physical boundaries. And so
that's
he
a hard
gets
one.
very close. He's always on top of everybody else and always hugging on everybody else.
Yeah. And that can come off as a dominating posture to neurotypicals, which I'm sure he's run into that problem before.
Right. And as kids, age up here a little bit, they're starting to go through puberty, and they're just like, that's, I feel uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And some don't mind it at all, and so it comes down to, so how do you explain to him that there's not a hard and fast rule about that. Like, you've got to be able to read your audience. Well, how can he do that? He can't read social cues. He can't read body language,
Yeah.
So we create a lot of works for him when he was younger. We would create a lot of works for him, being able to recognize facial expressions.
Yeah.
And keywords that people might say that would let you know that they are uncomfortable or that it's okay.
Wow. Okay. Yeah.
And so we have to, give him specific lessons about stuff like that. And now that he's older, we can, one thing that he worked on recently was he did a research paper on why people hold hands. He didn't understand that. He had never, he's always all over everybody, but he didn't understand why sometimes the kids wanted to hold their parents' or their teacher's hand.
Okay.
And so I was just like, well, let's find out. Why don't you do some research on that? And so I kind of guided his curiosity about that. And, he was able to come up with some of the physiological reasons and the emotional reasons, and he was able to find out some good information on that and then present it back. Which helped
what a great
him
idea
with public speaking, which is something we're really working on with this particular kid.
Yeah.
So,
but I mean, what a great idea to engage them in a way that helps them find the answer for themselves, because that can often be so much more powerful than someone going, "Here's a hammer, here are some nails, go do the thing." I mean,
right. And exactly, and it goes back to that, like, why do things work the way they work versus just a what,
Yeah. Well, especially social cues. Oh my God. They wildly vary from culture to culture.
Yeah.
From country to country.
Well, and this particular,
from gender to gender. And
this particular boy is Chinese.
Yeah. Okay.
So
now, did he grow up in China?
No.
Okay.
No, he was brought here as a toddler.
Okay, but I'm sure he still has all of the cultural things that, his ancestral lineage brings to him through his blood, as well as
his parents.
The way he grew up. Did they speak Chinese in the house all the time? Were they very, because I know that generations ago you had people come here and they would eschew everything so they could become Americanized, so people didn't bully them or victimize them, and
this particular family did certainly do that. And the mom doesn't speak any English, but like the dad only speaks English to the child, and then but so they're definitely we've definitely had a few conversations about how with his dad about how in their culture, being all over each other like that is fine at that age. Like, and inappropriate touching is not considered inappropriate in their culture. Like,
and inappropriate touching is wow.
Right, and so he doesn't.
It can be really confusing. I would imagine, coming from one culture where it's not dangerous and predatory to a culture where, in certain pockets of society, child predation flourishes because people are encouraged to keep secrets and not talk openly and honestly about their feelings. And I can't even tell you how many times I've spoken to both women and men who, as children, they had a relative or a close family friend molest them.
Right. And we all know that happens way more than is reported or
and it happens a whole lot more than than a scary trans or drag person in drag. This is child molestation is something that is very keep it in the family. And I tend to think that nuclear family units that are locked in, where it's us against the world, that's a really dangerous mentality, because then the child does not have the view of, in certain places in the world, you have a literal village raises child. And so the child has many varied experiences with people, and they can make a reasonable assumption of safety within that framework. But if you have two parents and maybe a sibling who is tormenting or literally torturing you, the horrific things that happen to children under the guise of protecting children is abominable.
Right. And so I that is one thing that I keep a close eye out for, is when I see families that are very sheltered like that shelter their kids too much. They don't let them go on play dates. They don't let them put them in extracurricular classes. They don't let them stay after school to play with their friends.
There's no real socializing other than schoolwork, and that's
right. And so, so I always find that a little bit suspicious, and and I kind of look into why. Like, are you like I have one child that really needs some more socialization right now, who's 6, who, mom is just scared for him, doesn't want anybody to hurt him, so he's not allowed to go to other people's houses. He's not allowed, and she's just being too much of a helicopter mom. And that's, you approach that one way, and then, but I have another family who it's, very strange, and I'm keeping a close eye on them, because they have 2 children who literally don't have any social interaction with anybody else.
It's you kind of have to wonder why you don't want your kids mixing with other kids socially. I mean, that's how you develop critical thinking skills, is being exposed to different ideas, different cultures, different ways of seeing the world, different perspectives.
Well, it's also how you develop empathy and compassion.
Yes.
And unless you're in those social situations, you don't have any kind of learning moments about how to problem solve and how to, all that critical thinking, like,
well, because you're told what the truth is, and you're not to question the truth ever. And that makes it really easy to not think about anything. But when you come to a point in your life where you see other people who are flourishing and happy, and they are everything that your parents or your community told you was wrong, and then all of a sudden you go, holy crap, what have I been doing all my life? I think this is one of those the reasons that small communities and small towns speak out against college so much. Because their kids leave and they learn about the world.
They get lots of new ideas and new information, and they explore them, as you should. And and that's when you come to adolescence, adolescence, your brain is telling, an adolescent brain is telling the kid that they need to be prepared for leaving the nest. They need to be prepared for surviving as an adult on their own. And so that's why they push against their parents. If their parents say the sky is blue, they're going to be like, no, that's wrong.
It's like they find out their parents are wrong about one thing, and all of a sudden everything is in question.
Parents are very stupid and we know nothing. So,
yeah, because a 16-year-old chewing bubblegum and wearing pink roller skates knows everything. Okay.
And they think they do.
And they really do. I know I did.
Yeah.
I knew.
Oh, I definitely
I knew
did.
everything when I was 16.
My parents were so stupid.
Jerks.
And,
that's why I shaved my head.
Yeah, me too. And kids in that frame of mind, when they're just doing what their anatomy and physiology is telling them they need to do for their own survival, they're being told that they're obstinate and that they're rebellious and they get in trouble all the time. And but it's really like necessary for kids to behave that way. And so
they've got to find the boundary, and
right.
if there's no boundary, then things get a little sketchy.
Right, and so that's in adolescence, then the lessons about socialization become like, this is why you feel that way. You should be aware of that.
Yeah,
and and then teaching them, okay, so yes. You need to now develop the skills so that people will hear you. I understand that you have many, many ideas on how to solve these problems that you're looking at in the world that you think are just ridiculous.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
and that's fantastic, because you are going to grow up and you guys are going to be the problem solvers of the next generation. So let's figure out the best way for you to be heard. Yeah. And so, we come up with lists of things that don't work. Yelling. Nobody listens to you when you yell.
Oh, yeah. People universally shut down when you start yelling.
But of course, the natural thing is, for teenagers to yell at people to get their point across, a lot of times because they've been yelled at.
Yeah. And when you don't feel heard or acknowledged, it's very frustrating, especially if you're in pain and you're trying to express that.
Right. And so, then it becomes lessons on how to achieve your goals of, making an impact. So ways that I do that is to allow them to actually create real impact, not just what am I trying to say? Not just imaginary scenarios on paper. What would you do in this situation?
Yeah, but, that would never happen. Yeah.
Things that aren't real. So let's find a real problem. There are plenty of them.
Oh my gosh,
Let's find a real problem in our community.
Yeah.
Let's brainstorm some actual ways to address it.
Yeah.
What can you do? What can other people do? How can you get the word out? Now let's do it and create like some actual impact. So I latch on to projects that have that real world scenario to it, because kids can make an actual change and an actual impact. And they don't have to imagining stuff like that. Kids it's a waste of time. Like, why would they, when there's plenty of stuff that they can actually do out there?
I think that as a society, we, as you stipulated, we prepare kids for things that we assume they're going to do, as opposed to figuring out where they are. Do they like engineering? Do they like math? Do they like art? What do they connect with the most? And then, support the hell out of them towards that, and just see them blossom into amazing people. That then, I hate using the term value added, but it really does bring beauty and intellectual curiosity into the world. It's necessary.
Curiosity is the number one skill that I want kids to leave with. If I can gift them anything, it's curiosity and finding that spark. That and again, empathy and compassion. Empathy and compassion allows you to work with other people. And again, we are social beings, whether you get the finesse of that or not. We have to work with other people. And I tell parents all the time, and I'm like, if they never understand algebra, they can still grow up and be, meaningful members of society.
Oh yeah.
If they don't understand empathy, they will never really amount to anything. Like, they'll never be able to work with other people. They'll never be able, to get very far.
Yeah.
And
they'll stay in their anger, and they will,
yeah.
and it will just be a negative scenario.
And we see, as we're in a capitalist society, we see people that have been given the finances, really, to excel despite a lack of empathy.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, it's easy access to resources is only one part of the whole thing.
Mm-hmm. And so, if we see what happens, I mean, we get people in power that have a lack of empathy and a lack of compassion, and we see how that affects the entire planet.
Yeah, it becomes an overwhelming dominant system in which everything is competition and destroying the competition instead of cooperation to come to terms with a common problem or a common issue that everybody experiences. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, I have a lot of little tools that I do. A lesson that my kids are really into right now is something called the kindness tree.
Yeah.
I have a tree in my classroom, and it's all pretty and it lights up, so it's very attractive, and the kids want to touch it all the time.
Nice.
And anytime that somebody shows you compassion, or shows that they care about you, or does something nice for you, or makes you feel good, or pays you a compliment, like anything like that, you can go and tie a little ribbon on this tree. And so we see the ribbons build up on the tree over the week, and then of course everybody wants to be able to tie more and more ribbons on the tree. They're very excited about it, and so it
it's a very interesting reward process. That's really interesting.
So it causes them intrinsically to want to do nice things for other people.
Well, I mean, you want the little dopamine rush of the little ribbon that you tied on there, and if kindness leads to that, I mean, hey, man, maybe hopefully that ends up fostering kindness overall, and
right, and so they get in the habit, of paying compliments to others and being kind to others, and because it had, and then they see a physical representation of that impact that they had when a ribbon goes up on the tree.
Oh yeah, and that's a tangible point of connected memory,
right?
That they can look at and go, I did good things, and if I do good things, then.
And it also normalizes it, because of course we have some kids that come to us and don't have a history with us, like say they're just coming to us for the first time in third grade from a traditional school, and they're very rough and tumbly, and they're just too cool to do nice things to other people, and so they see that, well, it is actually in our little microcosm, it's actually normal and typical, for people to purposefully do nice things for other people, and that is how our community works. So then there's that little extra boost that they want to be like the others in their community. They want to fit in because they're the new guy and whatever.
Well, that's a really important thing to touch on, is the whole being accepted by the community. Belonging is very important for a lot of people, whether we want to admit it or not. We all want to feel safe. We all want to have our retain our dignity, and we all want to belong to a group.
I'm sure that's why so many of us found the punk rock community when we were kids. The punk rock community has saved the lives of so many people, or the goth community, or whatever. So many people that didn't fit in found their family. Yeah. If I had not found my family when I was 16 and just raging at the world, I don't know what kind of life I would have had. Yep, same.
I feel very fortunate to have made a family of all the assorted misanthropes that I met when I was younger, when I was a wee misanthrope myself.
I'm gonna get a shirt that says that.
But you come to the understanding that you were pretty much lied to about everything, and that society is just this agreement that people with money and influence have come to an accord on.
Right. Money and influence, two things that society has also agreed upon.
Yeah,
that
exactly.
Are not real.
Exactly.
Right.
You know, I mean, it's money and is imaginary. It's an idea. Oh, we have a question from Resident Moon. Not all kids are open about their feelings and emotions. What are some icebreakers that you use to try to get an in and understand the child's developing interests? I'm asking because I'm having a hard time connecting with my nephews, who are very interesting kids, but I'm having a hard time finding a point of connection with them. That's a really good question.
So we look at this thing that we call the cosmic task. It's, wording taken from 120 years ago, but it's the idea that everything in the universe has a purpose. From the bacteria to
Mosquitoes,
us,
Yeah.
like everything has a purpose. And once you understand that, you see that everything works together and everything has a purpose within that system. Like the universe is one big system, and you can take it down onto the how our planet functions as one system, and our society functions as one system, and a family unit functions as a system, and an ecosystem, a biome, whatever. All the life within a pond. Yeah. And so you can start with these small ideas of how everything, food chains and things like that. That's a system. Everything on our planet works in systems and cycles. And so one thing I really like to do is trying to get kids engaged into figuring out what is the purpose of something, and it could be themselves, it could be a mosquito, it could be
space.
Yeah, it could be
anything.
Yeah. What is the purpose? What is it? What is it doing? What is it trying to achieve?
Yeah. What is music's purpose? What is math's purpose? Art's purpose? That's
right.
Yeah.
And so, and to look at a child and say, like, you also have a purpose, and you are going to spend many years trying to figure out what your purpose is, but you need to know that you have one.
Yeah.
And we don't know what that is yet.
Yeah.
It's up to you, what you're going to make of it, and to live up to your purpose. And nobody can tell you what your purpose is. It's up to you to be able to grow and discover what your purpose is. Like your parents can't tell you what your purpose is. I have a lot of kids that even in elementary school, their parents are just like, you're going to grow up and be a doctor, and you're going to go to Virginia Tech. And,
you're going to be a football player because Daddy couldn't make it to the big leagues.
Right. And I haven't gotten a lot of parent flashback about this one because I do it really low key, but I'm big on explaining to kids, like, nobody gets to tell you what you're going to make out of your life. Oof. Like, you are the only one that gets to tell the world what you are going to become. Then, if you grow up and you think your purpose is one thing and you pursue that and you decide that you're wrong, you can always go and do something else.
And it's
pursue
okay.
something else. Yeah,
it's
and that's completely
okay.
fine. Yep.
You are not the first kid, adult, teenager to discover that medicine, hey man, sick people, they kind of wig me out a little. Maybe I want to become a mechanic instead. You know? I mean, and
right.
It's okay.
Right.
But it's, I mean, when you intend to go to college with the purpose to learn things, along with your major, try to get some other stuff that you're honestly interested in there. Try to get like the topics that make your heart quicken and make your mind quicken.
That's why I'm a huge proponent of like liberal arts degrees, and trade schools are wonderful. My daughter goes to a trade school, and that's fantastic, and that is what she needs. But she also, I've also, tried to convince her to pursue other things to make her more worldly. So I encourage people, if they're not going to get it through their education system, try to travel. Try to get out there and experience.
Yeah, it's and by traveling, you don't have to spend a whole lot of money to fly out of country. Go to another county. Go to another state. Get out in nature. Go see waterfalls. Go rock climbing. Go experience the world, and you'll encounter people that have different points of view and different perspectives.
Right, absolutely, and so it's really important to get out of your comfort zone.
Yeah. Like join a photography group, or there's a program or a profile or what is it? A platform called Meet Me. And Meetup. Yeah. And you can meet a ton of different people that are into other spiritual things. That there are LGBTQIA meetups. There are just literally anything that you can think of, and that'll help you to meet more people. Maybe you won't like them, maybe you will.
Right, and the beauty about things like that is that you can go and try something out and then decide that you're not actually interested in that.
Yeah.
But you've experienced it now, so you've seen that there are other people that are interested in things other than what you're interested in, and you might come away with an insight as to why.
And it doesn't have to cost money.
Right.
It doesn't have to be an economic issue.
Yep. Absolutely. So, I mean, that's, cosmic task. That's
fantastic.
That's, what is its purpose? So it's, when it comes down to kids with anger, they find ways to be destructive. Yeah. And they just always want to fuck shit up and, crush the bugs and tear things up and or when they're little scribble on somebody else's work, things like that. They just will find little ways to be destructive. And so
I wouldn't be surprised if that was happening to them at home.
Right.
It's learned behavior, it's taught behavior.
Right. And so, by coming to an understanding that everything has a purpose, one of the things that I do with very little kids is if they squash a bug, I will be like, I will get very shocked.
Yeah.
And go, oh, what a shame. This animal had a purpose. Yeah. And its purpose was, if I know what its part in the ecosystem is, and I'll say like, its purpose was to whatever, and now it won't be able to fulfill its purpose. Yeah. Isn't that a sad thing? And so just teaching from an early age that it's important to let other things, other people, other entities at all fulfill their purpose.
Yeah. Let them exist. Yeah. Let them exist and let them thrive in the way that they need to thrive.
Right. And if their purpose is to be food, okay. Yeah. Then that's fine. If they're, and because I get that a lot from kids also, where they say, well, but I mean, you eat meat. I'm like, yes. and there are animals that we've actually created for the sole purpose of being food.
Yep.
Do I hope someday that, it won't need to come to that? Yes.
Yeah.
Right now, it's very difficult, but, I can see that that's part of our future.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we've got, I remember a friend had shared something recently about locust swarms.
Mm-hmm.
And there are now like tornadoes of mosquitoes overseas. And in a forager society, before agriculture, bugs were huge sources of protein.
Yeah, and they still are in a lot of the world.
Oh yeah, and if you're foraging, you can collect enough bugs in under 2 hours to where you have the rest of the day to fuck off.
Right.
I mean, and it's the only reason that we're disgusted with those sorts of things is because that we live in a society with a caste system that tells us that if you eat bugs, you're poor, and if you're poor, you're a piece of shit, and you deserve to suffer. And that's a problem.
Right. It's a huge problem. Yeah. Right. So,
but I mean, food is food. Period.
Yeah.
Whether it's something that
it's what is available.
Yeah, and everybody has that. I'm not really fond of the term peasant food, but it's more the stuff that you grew up with. Mm-hmm. And if you grew up in an impoverished family and in an impoverished community, there are foods that you are very fond of that people who grew up with money are disgusted by. Mm-hmm. And man, humans do what we can to survive. That's the goal of the animal on this planet, is to survive. And it's horrible to think poorly of someone because they have chosen to eat something that you find appalling and repellent because for them it's pleasing or it's what kept them alive,
Sure. Yep. And to that point, what you were saying a minute ago is, again, the empathy comes in. It's the idea that so many people in our society, and I'm sure many societies across the globe, feel that because somebody is poor, that they deserve to not, that they don't deserve to have nice things.
It's that prosperity gospel shit, that if you're poor, you're not God's favored. CEO Jesus is a dick.
Yeah. And, so I guess I've seen that recently with the idea that, college wasn't free for me, so it shouldn't be free, so people shouldn't be getting their student loans forgiven.
It's that whole I suffered, so you have to suffer. Why? Why? Right. What did suffering do for you?
Or like when you see the people complaining that the person panhandling is wearing a nice jacket.
Yeah. You've no idea if they had just got that jacket from a really nice neighborhood that happened to have a thrift store. Because rich people will get rid of the weirdest stuff.
Yep. I went to school in Ithaca, New York, the same town as Cornell. And we would go dumpster diving at the end of the semesters because the kids moving out of the dorms would just throw everything away. Yeah, throw all their clothes, their computers, like everything, brand new stuff, all gets put in the dumpsters.
Yeah. And I fall prey to this too because I have a stable, good source of income, and it's man. That whole more money, more problems is true because you adjust to fit what you can expend, whether it's energy, whether it's money, resources, what have you. And I really like what I'm seeing with Gen Z, where people are repurposing everything.
Yeah,
and it's I'm slowly learning how to do that, and it's a necessary skill. Clothes are not cheap. Shoes are not cheap. backpacks and stuff like that aren't cheap. You don't throw something out just because it has a hole in it.
Right.
Patch
You
it.
fix it. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Agreed. And so, and to that end, we also have a whole area of our curriculum that traditional kids don't get, which is called practical life, where we teach sewing and we teach, I've got embroidery hoops in my classroom on the shelf, and kids can choose that as a work, just like they can choose math.
I remember that was called home ec. Back when we were in school.
Right, but it's it's not like a separate class that you put all the girls in so that they can be homemakers.
Learn how to cook your daddy dinner.
Right. It's the boys in our the boys in our class, I think right now are doing a lot more embroidery and weaving than the girls are interested in, which is pretty cool.
That is cool. They're really valuable skills.
Right. And when something breaks in the class, last week we had this big, occurrence happen where this kid fell into a shelf and it broke the shelf and the materials fell off the shelf and exploded into a pile of a million things, and so they spent 3 days, everybody descended to help them.
Yeah.
And several kids got together and made a project of putting it back together without me telling them to. They put it back together over a few days, but then we have this broken shelf, and so I have some kids that I know really like to do all the carpentry stuff and fix stuff, and so I was like, here, tools, figure it out. And I don't care if the shelf gets destroyed, like they're going to mess around with this shelf and figure out how to take it apart and fix it, or maybe they won't, but they'll still learn some stuff while they're doing it.
Oh, definitely.
So, all those practical life things, and it's not me saying, oh, I guess we need a new shelf now. It's can we figure out how to use this one still?
Yeah. One thing that I really wish would find its way into public schools for children at a very young age is communication skills. Effective communication skills. How effective are you at getting someone who is not where you are mentally, physically, or emotionally to understand where you're coming from and what you need,
Right. So we talk a lot about iMessages, and we have a special table in our classroom where kids that need to resolve something can go and sit and nobody will interfere with them. And then we have other kids who are trained mediators. And so they've learned how to repeat and rephrase something that somebody says, so what I'm hearing is, and
that's powerful.
Is that correct?
Yeah.
So that they can kind of fine-tune people's language as they're speaking.
Yeah.
And then the kids learn from age 3 to give I messages. I feel blah 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 when this happened, and they learn not to use blaming language, so it's not when you did whatever, it's when this happened, and instead of pointing the finger and saying their name in an accusing way.
Like that statement made me uncomfortable because
right.
Yep.
So rather than yelling or saying don't do that, or we even when we're coming up with class expectations, which the kids come up with, I write it down, but they're the ones who come up with what they expect other people to behave like in our classroom.
Oh, that's fantastic.
And we talk about framing things in the positive. So, a basic one, so if instead of saying don't run in the classroom, it would be walk carefully in the classroom. Just rephrasing it to a positive has a big
Walk
impact.
with scissors.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would imagine so.
So, because the kids will instantly be like, don't do this, don't do that. And so you have to turn it into, okay, what do you want them to do? Because if you're just shooting people down all the time, again, they stop listening to you because you haven't given them a different way.
Well, you haven't given them a way to
be.
address it.
Right.
You've told them that something's wrong, but you haven't told them what your condition needs to be comfortable.
Right, because, a kid's favorite word when somebody's doing something that they don't like is stop, you know?
Yeah.
And
quit it!
And you're like, what? So it becomes kind of a game in our classroom where kids get a little facetious and they're like, well, what do you want me to stop? Stop breathing? What? So kids are, we give them lessons on how to phrase things specifically, be specific on what you want them to do, not what you want them to not do.
Yeah. That's fantastic. Yeah, I had not really read up on Montessori schools all that much, this is all really fascinating, and I'm really happy that it exists in the world. I just wish it was available to families and children of who had no access or low access to resources.
Right, and so that I'm currently teaching in a public Montessori school in Arlington, and we do we are a most of my kids are below the poverty level.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the one reason, because of course, teaching in the public system, we have so many hurdles we have to jump through.
Oof.
And we don't, like in Montessori, we don't traditionally use textbooks or workbooks or do testing or anything like that. And we have to do testing in the public school system, and we have to follow the Virginia standards of learning. So what we end up doing is, we do those things, but then we also do a lot of other things as well.
Yeah.
And, we focus, I'll give a lesson and then okay, let's take the assessment on that real quick. And now we can get back to the other stuff that you were more interested on.
Yeah. Yeah, here are the things you need for the test. Okay, now we're going to talk about stuff that, is going to affect you directly and help in all your interactions in the world.
It's going to make the world a better place.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah. So that's what I do.
That's so great. Thank you so much for coming by. Is there anything else that you want to add, or anything else that you can think of that maybe is coming up last minute?
No, just that main idea, if you have children or if you interact with children, the way that they are behaving expresses a need. They wouldn't be doing it unless their brain and body were telling them to. Yeah. So either they're repeating behavior that they've learned, or they have some sort of physiological need. If a kid is climbing on a bookshelf, it's because their brain is telling them that they need to develop upper body strength. It's not because they're being defiant. So take them and show them the safe way that they can
dude, there's
develop.
a jungle gym out back.
Yeah,
go climb on that. Yeah.
Let's go do this in a safe place.
Okay.
So it's
now, is that 100% always the case, or is it?
I mean, when a kid is being 100% defiant, it's because they're trying to assert independence.
That makes sense.
And independence is necessary. You don't want your kids living in your basement when they're 40. That's
why I did not have children.
Right. And and so you've got to recognize that independence and be like, hey, that's okay. That's okay that they want to be defiant. So it's really your job to just make sure that they're being safe.
Yeah.
You know, that they survived the defiance, right?
Oh yeah.
So
Yeah, that's a big plus.
so, you know, but encourage respect, encourage empathy, but not, you know, like the thing about the respect your elders, you know, I know I've met so many kids in my life who have absolutely no reason to respect their parents because their parents are not respectable people.
Yeah.
And that is the reality for many kids.
Yeah.
You know, and they should not respect them just because of their age. However,
Agreed.
you know, there are ways that they are expected to behave if they would like to get to the outcome that they're looking for.
Yeah.
And so those are social skills. Those
Yeah.
are things that they need to learn, you know.
Yeah.
And for me, everything comes back to empathy and compassion. Kids need to learn empathy. They need to know why their abusive parent behaves the way that they do. My daughter had an abusive father, and she came to her own conclusions as far as that goes. And when she was older and started coming up with theories, I was able to discuss them with her.
How old is she now?
She's 19.
Okay. So she's already gone through the terrible teens.
Oh yeah, and you know, you know, but it makes a difference. It makes a huge difference if you accept and recognize a child's behavior for being part of their development,
Yeah.
and just help guide them versus trying to mold them or have expectations of them or things like that. You know, there was a huge difference in the relationship that I have with my parents and the relationship that my daughter has with me. You know, my parents, you know, they had rules and I had rules for my daughter, but I mean, they also didn't understand me after, you know, probably age 7. They didn't understand why I wanted to do things that were more grown up than they wanted to let me do. They didn't understand when I was a teenager and I was rude and defiant and ran away and did things like that. And all of that stuff was completely normal teenage behavior, but they treated me like something was wrong with me. And medicated me and you know, institutionalized and everything else.
Yeah. Well, that was really popular back in the 80s.
It was the norm.
Yeah, that was all the rage. I mean, it's all of the conservatives back at that time were talking about, does your child have blue hair?
Right.
Do they talk defiantly back to you? Well, Back in Control Training Center will help get your child back in control.
Right. Yeah, and it's not our job to control our children.
Yeah.
It's our job to teach them how to control themselves.
Yeah.
And you know, and so the difference is that my daughter, you know, so my mom and I had a very stressed relationship. We didn't talk for a few years, a couple of times, and we're okay now that I'm, you know, 46, but you know, it was really on and off, and I never felt like I could come to my parents with any real information or real problems. You know, I always had to go to my chosen family.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, our parents, to handle problems.
Our parents were so busy working to try to pay for everything. And so they were constantly stressed about their varied relationships at work and their relationships at home and, you know, all of these other things. But it's I don't know why it's a little easier now for parents to engage. Maybe we're getting better as a species.
Yeah, I mean, the end result was that I ended up hiding everything about the real me from my parents.
Yeah.
You know, I kept all my clothes in my locker at school, you know, along with my alcohol. And you know, and I was almost never home, and I never brought friends over to hang out because I didn't want them to interact with my parents, you know. And I just hid everything. And if I had problems, I certainly didn't go to them because I knew that I would get some sort of consequence for it rather than you know, a help. And you know, with my daughter, it's very different. She has I've listened to her, and instead of giving her, you know, consequences, I've made her aware of what the consequences were of situations that she has ended up in, because there's always natural consequences. You know. And so we've explored the natural consequences, and I have listened to her and asked her, what would you like to do? How do you need help? What are your needs? And reminded her that she knows herself better than anybody else on this planet, and so she is best equipped to tell me how I can be of service to her.
Well, and that's another nutty thing, is the idea that we allow other people's ideas of who we are to supersede the being that lives in this meat suit for the entirety of our lives. You know, it's amazing how quickly we will give our power over to someone who has, like, they've met us 5 minutes ago.
Right.
And they've decided that we're not a good person, and we're ugly, and we're stupid, and we're like, well, maybe I am ugly and stupid. It's like, dude, this person has known you for 5 minutes. They can't possibly have, like, made that supposition. But we make these flash judgments all the time, and then that gets locked in.
Yep. I call it handing somebody your remote.
Oh,
so,
boy.
So, like, if you hand somebody the remote to your feelings, you know, then they can just sit there and keep pressing buttons all the time, and they're in control of you. Oh, yeah. If you don't want somebody else to be in control of you, you know, don't hand them the remote.
How do you talk to kids about that?
That's the analogy I use. Yeah.
Yeah. And are they receptive to it?
It takes them. I mean, that's a hard one, because kids are more reactive.
Yeah.
You know, but with that, I when they react, I will usually just say, think and try again. Yeah. You know, you have the tools. You know how to make yourself heard in this situation. You know how what is the thing that you actually want the other person to know right now? Yeah. And let's go from there. You know, versus being so reactive. You know, or we have a list of like verbal things that don't work, and that our kids made towards the beginning of the year, and so I'll just, like, direct them back to, like, remember you said yelling doesn't work.
Okay, so, all right.
So let's think about what does work, because we have a list of stuff that does work also. So
I think I don't remember where I heard this, but it is a prevailing psychological idea that the first 5 years of a child's life are where they're the most important in development. So the things that they experience and take away from that experience set the tone for the rest of their lives.
Yes.
And so if you're in an abusive environment, if you're in a neglectful environment, I can't imagine what that would do to a child's mind who has been in a truly abusive household when they find out that that doesn't happen to everybody.
Right. So Piaget and Montessori both posited that your self-esteem is developed, like it is set by the time you are 6 years old.
Okay.
And that means that all of the things you have heard about yourself and all the ways that people have treated you, and the things that have happened to you go into shaping that. Yeah. So it's, you can tell kids all you want, but how you act around them, how you react to them, how you show, are you invested in their day, even though their day might have been filled with a bunch of completely ridiculous things because they're 3. But pretend it's that thing when the 3-year-old calls you on the banana phone, you better pick up and be serious about it.
Don't leave the kid hanging. God only knows why he's calling.
Right.
Right. And if it wants a pizza, you could say the pizza will be delivered.
Yeah.
And then you could tell him that the pizza got rerouted or the ice cream got rerouted. I mean, it's
right.
Try to remember what it was like to have a sense of wonder.
Yeah.
And a sense of curiosity and joy with the world, and kind of step into that with your kid. And I would imagine that's going to bring that out in you as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I tell my kids all the time, I learn so much from them every day. Being around them keeps me young. I don't feel 46.
That's awesome.
Sometimes I feel 80 at the end of the day, but mentally I don't feel 46.
Yeah. I wish that we had a way to observe, and this sounds very authoritarian, but there are millions of children who are sold into sexual slavery by their parents, by friends of the family. Mm-hmm. They are abused, whether it's physically, mentally, emotionally. And I can't help but think that if it wasn't 2 adults trapped in this house with this child that is constantly crying, because the 2 adults have other shit they've got to do. We live in a society where both parents are working, both parents can't be home all the time, and it's a presupposition that the woman in the relationship ends up doing, cleaning the house, doing the laundry, and even though we're going to work, like the men are. And I can't help think that if we decided to look at cultures where we had an entire village, an entire neighborhood of trusted people that could watch over the children, instead of, you don't get to tell me what I teach my child. I'm like, no, you don't get to teach your child to be a racist asshole, because that affects the rest of us.
Right.
I just wish we weren't so locked into these small family units, and then these little,
don't know our neighbors.
Yeah. I'm only gonna make friends with people on my child's soccer team, or my child's bandmates, or their friends. It's when you sequester yourself away from the world, you sequester yourself from community.
Right.
And that's not really healthy either. Mm-mm. We all need community.
Yep, absolutely. And so I grew up. My younger childhood was in a rural village in England, and it was definitely age 3, 2 even before that. I was in a little tiny town in Idaho. Yeah. But from age 2, I was running out of the house and hi Finland.
Hi Finland.
And I was running all over the place, and my parents felt comfortable with that because they knew that everybody was watching out for all the kids. So So in England, if I did something I wasn't supposed to do, by the time I got home, my parents had heard about it.
Yeah. Well, there's I remember reading about a couple some villages in Africa where the child, it's when the parents have the child goes to live with a variety of aunts and nephews, nieces, grandparents, and the parents go do what they need to do for the village to thrive. And therefore, it's not just two people who are exhausted and snapping at each other because they are being woken by a crying baby. You have a large number of people.
Yeah, and doing all the work. Yeah.
Exactly. Community, many hands make light work. And we keep forgetting that, especially when it comes to family.
Yep.
You know.
Absolutely. And that family can be your blood family, or it can be your chosen family.
Yeah, both are valid. Both are valid. The people in your life, as long as they care about you in a way that allows them to sit comfortably with you being vulnerable and expressing that, and if they're supportive and compassionate, it is very much, that is the kind of person that you want in your life. That is the kind of, I often say that other people can be mirrors for us. And if you surround yourself with mirrors who are healthy and who are happy with themselves, you will get a reflection that is more reliable than from someone who is angry and snapping at the world and always finding excuses for why things are going poorly.
Yeah.
You know, there is a way through it. It's community. Community is how we, it's how we come together. It's how we save each other.
Yep. And, you know, if you are one of the members of the community that understands how to be in that community, great. Understand that there are people who don't. Understand that there are people who don't get the social cues and don't understand the rules, and be helpful to them, not critical. Yeah.
Please, if you are a neurotypical person watching this, please read a book about autism or about neurodivergence. And it will, believe it or not, it's going to help you with your communication with other people as well.
Yep, absolutely.
It's going to help you get a broader idea of how best to interact and communicate with the people around you so that there aren't misunderstandings. I mean, most of the movies and the TV shows that we watch nowadays, if people had just openly communicated, none of that horrific stuff would have happened, you know? And it's lean in and open.
Yep.
As much as you can. And every time you do it, and every time somebody catches you emotionally, verbally, physically, like, integrate that. Because that's a gift. And that's probably a good place to end it.
All right.
We got to almost an hour and a half.
Oh, my goodness.
Thank you, everybody who joined us. And thank you, Nicole, for coming to my house to talk to me about this. This has been
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. It's been an honor.
It's been fun.
Yeah. I hope that you have a wonderful rest of your day. I hope that your Sunday is great. I hope that you sleep well and wake well rested to face the day on Monday.
Be kind.
Yes. Thank you for joining us.